Please be sure to also follow Maitri Bay Area on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter. This way you can stay updated with all the programs and amazing things that our youth leaders are doing. With that, I think we are ready to start the Q&A section. So definitely keep the questions coming, but if I could invite all of our panelists to turn on their cameras and we can get started. All right, so our first question came from Miriam, said, "Thank you for a wonderful and candid conversation. Anyone on the panel have quote unquote tiger parents? And if so, how did you deal with them, especially if their expectations are not met?" If any of our panelists would like to take that question, feel free to just unmute yourself.
I can start. I can't say I have tiger parents, but like I'm sure that you've heard like even if your parents are tiger parents, they do want the best for you. I think just the best thing is not to fight them, but to communicate candidly to them that, well, you have your own pursuits, just like Kushal mentioned. And well, I can't really speak from experience, but that's what I can say. Those are my 2 cents.
Yeah, adding on to that, I'm fortunate enough to not have like full-on tiger parents, but I do definitely have parents that are very like achievement oriented and would like me to get into a top college like Harvard or Yale or Stanford and so on. And so they definitely do set like high expectations for me, and I set high expectations for myself. And what I've noticed in terms of not meeting their expectations, if I can communicate with them that like I'm happy with where my life is going, I'm happy with like the success that I have had, or if I've had any failures that I've learned from them, that tends to help, because my parents just want the best for me. If they know that I'm learning from the mistakes and the failures that I've had, then they know that I can still grow and that I can still achieve success in the future. And so just communicating your own interests and goals. Like, for example, my parents consistently pushed me towards computer science. I had to convince over a period of a couple of years that that was not my passion and that I would rather pursue economics or finance. So I think it's just important to not necessarily give in, but to show them that you can pursue your interests and passions, that's what makes you happy, and you can still be successful in the future with that.
I would like to add on to that and say, although I definitely don't have tiger parents, I do come from an Asian household that practices filial piety, which means you kind of give a lot of respect to your parents and you kind of follow their words blindly. But over the years, being in a Western society and an Indian society, kind of combining those two and communicating with my parents, the differences I see in both, I think we've grown together to kind of understand each other better. So adding on to what Ishani and Eric were saying about communication being important, it really is important. And I think that's just the way you can get around having quote unquote tiger parents.
Sorry. Speaking to what everyone else was saying, I also do not have tiger parents, but I do live in an Asian household, and a lot of the expectations that my parents held of me were not consistent with what I had for myself. So I believe that through communication and kind of explaining that this is what is good for me, I was able to kind of overcome the ideas that my parents could kind of define my life, because the only person that can really define one's life is themselves, and not your parents. If you just listen to yourself, I believe that it's really up to you what you do with your life. So I think that that's the kind of philosophy that I took throughout my time.
Thank you. That was wonderful insight from our student panelists. I actually talked upon this topic at Radio Zindagi, and I can kind of speak more to the parent side of things. I think as students, when our parents tell us something, obviously, early on, we tend to listen more than we do when we start growing up. And so the more that things are forced down of us, sometimes there's rebellions and students aren't guaranteed to listen. So I think as simple as a conversation can help meet that balance. And I think that's been the trend with all of our responses is communication and conversations, and that having that open conversation about what will make your child happy and what will make the parent happy, and coming to that happy medium will ensure success for both sides of the party. So really just communicating and making sure that whatever path that you are taking, you are the happiest doing it, because I think something that I've noticed is that if you aren't truly happy doing what you're doing, then success isn't going to come along. I think happiness and success definitely come hand in hand to a certain extent. So, all right, moving on to our next question. This is actually for Leena. The question is, what would you suggest parents to do to make sure teenagers are emotionally taken care of?
So I would say that just like, as parents, we are focused on, and I'm a parent too, so I can speak to that role. We are mostly focused on the physical well-being of our child. So we really put in a lot of effort to make sure they are eating nutritious food, they're eating at periodic times. We also understand that exercising is good for our bodies. So we try to make sure they are getting exercise of some kind. So we either have them play a sport or, encourage whatever physical activity they get either through a sport, or if not, you tell them to work out or join gym or go for walks or hikes with you. So that certainly comes much more naturally to us. But what I feel like often is missing is also thinking about their mind and their emotions, and focusing on what can be done to make that healthy, and how can that be fostered in a way that they can become emotionally resilient as well. So the focus shouldn't just be, okay, I want them to be physically well and not get sick and focus on that type of resilience, but also emotional resilience. And just like our body needs exercise and nutrition for it to be healthy, our mind also needs that. So cultivating, habits of open communication, talking about emotions, and times where maybe you are upset about something or you've had a tough day, talking about those things openly and normally, and normalizing that, yes, I can also have a bad day, I can get stressed out, I can feel sad sometimes, and what empathizing and validating their feelings. I think that's very important. A lot of the times, culturally, because that emotional communication was never a focus when we were getting raised by our parents. It tends to not be a focus at all. We don't even take a moment to actively listen to our kids. So I think, that communication that all the youth members were talking about really becomes an open communication and a worthwhile communication that can resolve all kinds of conflict only if you are willing to actively listen to your child. So active listening, not just like listening for the heck of it and whatever they're saying something, but really being there. I hope people know what active listening means, that you're really not just, just listening for the words of it, but actually going in between those lines and understanding what they're trying to say and validating their feelings about that. You may disagree with the feelings they may be having in that moment, that maybe one failure of some sort makes them feel so dejected and they're already feeling like, oh, my life is over. You may feel like that might be an extreme reaction. You may feel that, that's a little not so proportionate to what's happened. But your first step should always be to validate that, because you're not them. And when you were in that age, you felt the gravity and intensity of those failures or situations much more. So really, focusing on validating those feelings and empathizing, putting yourself in their shoes, and feeling how this could be feeling. Maybe this was their first thing of some sort that was so hard for them. They don't have that maturity to look at this and have a deep perspective taking. So those types of teachings need to be incorporated, but the first step is to listen and validate and empathize, and then you can get some of your views and perspectives, incorporated and share and try to teach them if you're trying to like teach them something. So I think that's really important. Just like we check on how you're doing today. If they were having a headache yesterday, we make a point to check in next day. Are you feeling better? Is your headache gone? I think similarly, if they were having a blue day yesterday, it's important to check in how they're doing emotionally today. How are you feeling? Emotionally is also a question to periodically, check in with.
Thank you so much, Leena. That was great. We actually have a question from a Facebook Live viewer saying, I hear about kids not sharing with their parents. What are easy steps parents can do to engage kids in a healthy conversation? I think it'll be interesting to hear again from Leena as a parent, but also from our students to say kind of the opposite side, how do students engage with their parents even when there's a little bit of reluctance?
Do you want me to start first?
Sure, yeah, go ahead.
Okay, I will just I'll keep it short because I think it will be best coming from our youth because they are at the receiving end. So I personally think as a parent, as a child psychiatrist, you have to get creative to join your kids where they are at this teenage stage of life they are in. So you may not be fond of the show they may be watching or the video game they may be playing, and they may not be interested in going out on walks or hikes with you or running errands with you. So, of course, they are becoming this mini adult and they are trying to be autonomous. They are more stubborn than you are. So you have to keep that into perspective and make an effort to join them in whatever interests them. So I try to like watch a show that I'm like, oh, this is a crazy show I would be watching, but I have to watch it because that's my opportunity to sit and spend some time with my daughter and like maybe have a conversation around the characters of the show. And that could open the doors for other conversations too.
Yeah, I definitely agree with Leena's perspective. I think it's important to not necessarily like force a conversation and make it feel like it's like an intervention or or like the parent is trying to solve something that they see is wrong within their child. So I think it's really important to have it be more of like a natural conversation where it seems like you're just talking about various things, whether it's like stuff that happened at school or so on. And then you can kind of lead into whatever serious issue that is happening. It's kind of awkward when the conversation is more forced or it feels like your parent is trying to solve something that they see is wrong with you, or they're kind of making it seem like something is wrong with you when there's really nothing that is wrong.
Yeah, I would agree. I would say rather than approaching your child with as if it was like a concern or anything like that, I think just approach them with a natural conversation. That's the best way to kind of solve through that. And also compromise is something that's very effective in terms of finding the balance between parent and, the parent and child perspectives. So I think having that natural conversation, kind of just figuring out where each person is at emotionally. And I think that just is the best way to go with the relationship.
Yeah, so like Shamita and Ishani said, I think that the best way to communicate with kids is through casual conversation, just kind of an easy introduction to the serious topic. And I think that kind of fosters a sense of camaraderie. But I think that the most important thing is validation. The most crushing thing to hear is when your emotions or feelings are not warranted and that they aren't deserving of respect. So I think that the most important thing to do in that situation is just validate their opinions and kind of hear what they have to say before offering your perspectives.
Yeah, I definitely agree with all my fellow panelists, and I do think that what they said was very true. I also can't speak for others, but I tend to share most with my parents when I'm around my parents more. So I guess like when I'm spending an extended period in my room by myself, I'm obviously less inclined to, I'm less inclined to tell my parents things when I see them. But I guess, yeah, if you're trying to get your kid to share with you, just spend some time with them and just be with them. Obviously, don't intrude on their privacy, but that's that.
Thank you so much, panelists. This is actually a question back to Eric, talking about toxic masculinity. The question's from Rahul. It says, which masculine qualities are perceived as harmful, beneficial, and are there any that remain ambiguous or change depending on a certain situation? It's a great question.
Yeah, that is a great question. And I think, Rahul, if you're referencing a part of my speech, I know what part of that is. I said like something along the lines of, oh, I don't think all masculine qualities are bad. They're just bad when they're taken to a really harmful extent. So an example of that would be like a masculine quality would probably be like coolness. You have to keep it cool. I think, yeah, that's generally good when you're worried or distressed. You like try to keep things professional, which is it's a good thing. But it's only bad when you take that to an excess. And an example of when that's taken to an excess is when you're telling yourself not to show any emotions. And well, you need to show emotions for catharsis. So that's just one example. Another example is like, males have to be dominant. That's a traditional masculine trait. And I actually think that, showing that you have strength is a good thing. But obviously when it's taken to an excess, it's bad. That's what makes masculinity toxic, and it's what most people think of when thinking of toxic masculinity. So I hope that answered the question.
Awesome, thanks, Eric. This one's for Shamita. What steps can young people take to combat normative beauty standards in the South Asian community?
All right, so for me personally, I think I kind of just ignored the beauty standards at first. I mean, at first, like my family kind of made me familiar with that, and I kind of grew up with those beauty standards. But I think after some time, I kind of just ignored them and focused on kind of improving myself as a person and my speech and the way I communicate with others, because I think ultimately your face value can only take you so far. And I think beauty standards are way too overrated. So you should really be focusing on yourself. And even when you're struggling with body image and stuff like that, you make sure to be open about it, because you never know when another person's feeling the exact same way as you unless you speak up. So I guess communication, once again, is really important in terms of combating beauty standards. And also, I think as we progress into the future, you can see more people on social media, especially, kind of talking about this issue and talking about their own stories. So I think it's important to open up and just let others know your personal stories and how you've dealt with body image issues as well.
That's great. And I actually watched a TED Talk recently that is all about, it was just called Fat. And it was basically about why does fat have a negative connotation to it? It shouldn't, right? It's just a different body type. And it's a really insightful TED Talk. So I encourage everyone out there to really go explore those topics, especially on social media. All right, just a few more questions to wrap up tonight. Do our student panelists feel they have received support, knowledge, and education on mental health issues from their middle and high schools? Is it part of the school curriculum?
I could get started on that. So I believe that there definitely is a lot of work to be done with regard to the mental health curriculum at our school, at our schools. At least in the Fremont Unified School District, we are allotted 1 semester of health in our freshman year, which means that we don't even get to really see what high school is about, because that comes after we take our health class. So I believe that health is really important because every year gives its own challenges. For example, as an upperclassman, you have to definitely value time management more, and I guess being able to handle relationships and things like these kind of social aspects of health. I believe that these are kind of not spoken about as much because it's just as much of a taboo in school as in South Asian communities. So I believe that there's a lot of work to be done. I'd say that if we could have a kind of health program that's geared toward the student for all 4 years, that would be the ideal one. But I think that there is a lot of work to be done.
Yeah, adding on to that, I think growing up, I didn't have that mental support or the support programs that my school now provides me with. And I think it's a changing movement. We're progressing into a better society where schools are focusing more on the health of their students and the mental health especially. So I think with social media once again and the power of the internet, the schools are recognizing the importance of mental health, and students are taking their own initiatives as well. So it's not just schools, taking the initiative. I think it's also important for students as yourselves to take initiative and let your school know that, hey, we need these resources if you felt like your resources are not being provided for mental health resources.
Yeah, elaborating on that. So Kushal brought up that within the Fremont Unified District, there's actually a health course in which they do talk about things like mental health, addiction, alcohol abuse, and so on. And I think one thing with that, especially since I switched high schools, I actually am taking that course this year as a senior. And I've noticed that a lot of the skills they are teaching in that course are quite useful, especially when you're younger. Like I've already experienced like pretty much most of high school. So I've gone through a lot of these things that the health course is now teaching me. And I've already had these experiences I've learned through kind of like my own struggles personally. So I think that schools are definitely starting to become more open to encouraging dialogue about mental health issues and addiction, and toxic masculinity and peer pressure and so on. But I think when many of the panelists were younger, it wasn't that big of a deal. Like nobody really took it seriously. It wasn't covered as much. It was kind of ignored, and many people pretended it didn't really exist. But as time has gone on, I think people are starting to recognize the importance of mental wellness, especially within schools that are so highly competitive within the Bay Area, where like students are essentially competing to like determine who gets into an Ivy League school.
Yeah, my school has our guidance department has a sector that deals specifically with mental health issues or abuse. I think that, yeah, it is great that schools are recognizing that that's important, but at the same time, the students also need to be encouraged to seek help, or at least seek help on behalf of another person, because I do know people who do struggle with mental health issues but don't actively seek for the help. Also, another thing is I think people are afraid to ask for help. My school is comprised of many athletes, so toxic masculinity, as you can imagine, is very prevalent. There have been some cases of rape, which is super distressing, but nobody talks about it. And I think people should be able to talk about it.
Thank you to all of our panelists. Unfortunately, we only have a few more minutes for today, and I see some really great questions in the Q&A box. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to drop AOC's email in the chat, and I really encourage everyone with these amazing questions to reach out to them via that email, because I know our student panelists would be more than happy to answer them. But one final question to actually close up the night for our panelists today. What more can agencies like Maitri and Agents of Change do to help youth?
So speaking on behalf of Agents of Change specifically, so we have started a lot of different initiatives in the past and in the present that work to better our community. So this specifically has been a panel that we've done across many years with Maitri. We've had this partnership pretty well established to address the issues that surround mental health. And we talk about different things, as you saw today, with toxic masculinity and peer pressure and the stigma surrounding mental health. And we're definitely going to continue with events like these in the future. So I think it's especially important to just go out there into our community to work, to engage in open conversations, whether it be with like your own children or with parents, or with those that with like different school officials and so on. So I think it's just really important to engage within your own community instead of distancing yourself or pretending that your own problems or somebody else's problems don't exist.
I think that panels such as these are a really great example of how organizations like Maitri and AOC can kind of effectively reach out to the community, because I feel that for a lot of teenagers, it's kind of challenging to find help because it's such a taboo concept, and because most of the mental health professionals, or all of the mental health professionals, are seemingly do not have the same experiences, and that's a misconception. But a lot of teenagers do feel that they're kind of trapped within their own kind of high school experience, and that no one else has really experienced the same things that they have. So I think that by working with teenagers, and I guess having people like having teenagers that have undergone the same kind of high school experiences at the same time kind of speak about their own experiences, I think that that's a really great way of kind of reaching out to the population.
Yeah, I would definitely agree with Kushal here. I think that sharing is everything, because no one really knows what's going on in someone else's life until you have the courage to speak up about it. And it's only then where you can make change together. It's then you recognize each other's perspectives. So I think it's all about that communication and openness.
So say from what I said before, like encouraging people to speak out about their experiences and seek help when they need it, I think I'd have to agree with Ishani, Shamita, and Kushal that the best way to do that is to just make these conversations happen. This is personally my first mental health panel I've been in, and I found it to be so fascinating. I really love my fellow panelists' speeches, and even in this Q&A session, I'm finding really insightful like questions and responses that will actually really resonate with me. So yeah, thank you for that, and I really do think that this should happen more often.
Going off of Eric's sentiment. Oh, Leena, go ahead.
Yeah, I just, Alisha, just one quick, not necessarily it's a plug-in, it may come across like that, but just resonating with what the youth were, the other forum youth, people, on the panel or panelists were sharing. That's been our model for our podcast, Mindful, Beautiful, and Thriving. So we've interviewed high schoolers, we've interviewed people who've gone through a journey with depression, anxiety, and ADHD, things like that, and they've shared some real perspectives on that, and also talked about the treatment aspects, not just like the problems. So yeah, I think not necessarily a plug-in. It's a free podcast, but you may want to listen and share it with others as a resource. Just kind of like that sharing and normalizing and making this as yet another open conversation is kind of what I'm trying to like go with. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Leena. And again, going off of both those sentiments, thank you to our student panelists, but more importantly, thank you to everyone who joined in for the conversation today. The first step to change is just showing up and being open and willing to hear different perspectives and keep a growth mindset. So thank you for coming to our panel today, and I hope everyone has a great rest of the day.
Thank you so much, everyone.